Thursday, it's time to see which stocks are pushing towards a strong week finish. We still have a day and a half to go, and of course, the American market has 2 full days to go. And Hans-Henrik, talking about the American markets, record high yesterday for the S&P 500 and for Nasdaq. Um, in a crisis situation where the world is at war, how does that make sense at all?
Well, the market does not always make sense. We just have to realize that. And we could come up with all sorts of explanation as to why it should go down. If there's excess liquidity running into the market, well, it goes up. Right now, a lot of shorters are shutting down their positions, so that pressures us up in new all-time high.
We're going to excuse that Liam Flavelle is not around. He has technical issues with his internet connection in the UK, and that's why he hasn't shown up for the show. We still hope that he'll be around. He is, of course, our fashion expert and, of course, our tech expert as well. So we'll have to do without him. But rest assured, Henri, because we can't say the H since it's French, will take over for Liam when it comes to the fashion. Once again, welcome to MyStockScanner Live, where we stay sharp when the markets hit extremes. Today, we are seeing record highs in both the US, as mentioned, but also Japan with record high with the Nikkei 225. The sentiment, and there is a sentiment reader that says we are in greed territory. Hans-Henrik will explain what the warning signs is and where that greed reader comes from. We are still having a conflict in the Middle East, but the oil holds steady at the moment. And in tech, TSM, or Taiwan Semiconductor as we call them, delivers another earnings beat and keeping the AI and memory story alive. But is it a bubble? I know we're not supposed to say the B word, and we just did, but we'll talk about that later in the show. Well, we also look for key earnings for Netflix and Pepsi, and in Europe, the luxury brands are under pressure. Back home in Denmark, the FDS had a record day yesterday, 15.7% up, and Novo is having another good day and climbing. Number of the day, 87,840. What it is in regard to, I can tell you later. Give a little hint, it's something to do with chips. And let's get to those records then, Hans-Henrik, because Nikkei, the Nasdaq, and the S&P 500 all broke their records yesterday. And Russell 2000 not far behind, and the same with the Dow 30 and Kospi as well. What on earth is going on?
Well, normal market insanity, I guess. There's a lot of technicalities in there. People had expected a further downturn in the market. So when that happens, people borrow a lot of stocks to sell out in the market. That is what is called shorting. And all of a sudden, the market started bouncing again. There was a ceasefire and stuff that triggered that. And that means all of these shorters got scared. So they started buying back their stocks again, which pressured the stock up or the markets up. And then something happened called a gamma squeeze, that is from the option market. So, and we've had some very good earnings from the banks and so on. That has also helped. So all in all, maybe not the most logical V-shaped recovery, but I have a feeling we'll see a bit more red.
The thing is that I said that in the beginning of the show here, that we're also talking about a greed index. And of course, when we're talking shorting, it's all to do with greed because you're kind of playing on the market. That greed index is something that CNN puts up. Take us into it.
Yeah, and let me just show you here. If you want to find it yourself, just Google CNN Fear and Greed Index. It's basically, it has been around for quite a long time. And it measures, I think it's 7 different things, some market momentum and a lot of things. I'll not go into details, but it's all described out here beside all the, at the side of all the graphs. But when that is in extreme fear or extreme greed, we normally see a turning point in the market. Right now, it has moved into greed, which means that people are actually running for the quick bucks right now. We can see that we were down in extreme fear here in the beginning of the end of March. We are also down here in the beginning of November, and we had a long period where we were in extreme greed up here. So it's not something with that you can count on as an exact turning point thing. However, it is good to see, well, right now we are at a new all-time high. We're moving into greed. The entire world economy might be in shambles, but investors don't really seem to care.
In an example of that, we're going to talk a shoe company called Allbird, not Freebird, but Allbird. That was a shoe company until basically yesterday, and then they turned themselves into an AI company and went up by 700%. Come on, make sense of that one, Hans-Henrik, because that is really craziness on a higher level.
Yeah, well, I think I'll be leaving for the day if you want to make me to make sense of that. But yes, Allbirds, it's a shoe, they were a shoe company, and they have lost 99.5% of their stock price. So they're basically bankrupt if you're looking at the stock price at least. Then yesterday they said, oh, let's skip the shoes and let's double up or double down or whatever it's called. We will borrow $50 million in convertible bonds. That is more than double what the company is actually worth. And let's invest it all in AI infrastructure that we can rent out. And on that, they went from something like 230 to at some point, they were up 10x at some point. They ended only 600% up, and I can see in today's pre-market that people have realized that the emperor has no clothes on, so they're down 26% more.
It almost sounds like one of the scams that we are warning people about when a pump and dump situation.
Yeah.
But somehow, I'm almost going to say, how can this be legal?
Yeah, well, I will not. I'm not an expert on that, but I have seen it a number of times. When we saw in 1999, where people just changed their names to something with tech, and that made the stocks go up. In 16, 17, they changed it to something with blockchain, and the stock went up. And we saw it last year where people started throwing AI into the company names just in random places. So I'm not really sure what to say here. I think it's insane.
Let's go back to the macro side of things, because now this was a very specific stock that we dived into. And the macro side of things is what you tell about in your morning newsletter that's called the market scan. It comes before 9 o'clock, before the market opens, and you take a helicopter view of what's going on in the market. And one of the things that was making news this morning, first of all, oil was steady, maybe to somebody's surprise, as the Strait of Hormuz is still open or still closed. And then the China economic growth accelerated to 5% in the first quarter in a situation where we have a crisis. Again, I'm going to ask you again, make sense of it.
Yeah, well, the oil right now, what we're looking at when we're looking at the oil price is what's called the futures, or basically it's actually what's called the spot. And that means what can you trade it to on the futures exchange right now? Well, it's what we call paper oil. If you want to see what the real oil is traded at, let me just see here. Out in the different markets, as we saw, it was down and then between 90 and 95 in the futures market. But it's trading 109, 110, 113, 100, 114, 16, depending on where in the world you're trading it. There are also some places that are lower, but basically the real oil is a lot more expensive. And then there's an added risk premium to this, somewhere between $20 and $50, depending on where you're buying it. So actually filling up 2 million barrels of oil into a big tanker will set you back something like $130 to $180 a barrel right now, which is almost double what we can see in the futures market. So that is starting to crush different countries. I just saw that, for instance, in India. Now, this is gas, but basically everyone in Asia is very, very reliant on oil and gas coming out of Hormuz. And they are really being hit. And we just did in the market scan this morning an article or part of the article about how we in Europe and US are being hit on everything, on fertilizer, on plastic, on whatever we are making. Everything is tied up on fossil fuels.
But how can the China economy then accelerate? They were supposed to come in at 4.5, I think it was. And
these are slow-moving numbers, so they don't have a lot of the effect of this. The real effect of this Hormuz will be setting in Q2, Q3, Q4. We can even see the futures oil markets. We can see that in December, just a month and a half ago, it was expected that oil would be at about 50, maybe $48 a barrel at the end of the year. Right now, they're expecting 50% higher. So this is some slow-moving numbers. We can see that the overall numbers from China was actually fairly bad this morning, both on fixed asset investments and retail sales and so on. The GDP was a bit higher than expected. That was good. That was fine. But it's not that important in the bigger scheme.
And since Liam Flavelle, and I'll tell people who have joined the show later here, is challenged technical-wise with his internet connection, of course, had it been anything to do with tech, he would have solved it within seconds. That's the way he is. So, Hans-Henrik, you'll have to take over and take us through the numbers that came from Taiwan Semiconductor this morning. And the reason it was this morning is, of course, because they are at home in Taiwan. So that's when they gave the numbers. But basically, Hans-Henrik, we already knew the numbers a week ago because they basically phoned them in, and that's when the stock jumped. That was last
they
week.
did some pre-reporting, and that is normally, or that is fairly normal. And there we saw this jump in the price here. So people were expecting some very good numbers. There were really good numbers that came out today, but we kind of knew that already. The margins are improving. They simply they can sell everything they're making. Almost 75% of all they're selling is that very, very highly advanced low nanometer chips, 7 nanometers and below. And that is where the competitors have a hard time following them, really. We can see in the pre-market, they actually dropped somewhat here. They are down how much in pre-market? 2.5% here. So I think this is a bit buy the rumor, sell the news kind of thing. And we on purpose didn't buy on this FOMO thing the last couple of days. We really do want to get in. It's a fantastic company. If we look at it, it's just all green, really, really good quality, earnings per share, revenue, everything going up, return on capital, free cash flow, everything is good. There is some massive potential in it still, and they are actually in a fairly good trend. If we zoom a bit out here, we can see a really good trend. We just don't want to buy on that, I don't know, 20% in a few days jump here. So let's see where it goes. I would not be surprised if we buy it at some time.
And one of the things that have me wondering, because now you're telling that in the pre-market, in the US pre-market, it's down by 2.5%, because yesterday Microsoft jumped by 4.6%, and I thought it was going to follow suit with the 2.5 drop then. But if I look at pre-market prices, it's almost up 1.5% again. Are we see Microsoft?
Yeah. Microsoft, we have seen a general, if we're looking at, for instance, that ETF is called IGV, that is expanded tech software. They are the ones that have been hit a lot by the entire AI scare. AI is the different mythos and what they're called AI models. Are they going to take over from Anthropic and so on? And they have been hit really hard by this. And yes, the software part went up yesterday and is going up a bit today. But I think most people can see this is not really a trend yet. We are looking at, for instance, Microsoft, because if it's finding a bottom here, we might want to get in early, actually. But that is something we'll tell our members about, because it's a bit outside our normal rules, but sometimes we have a few extra special rules. And Microsoft could be something that we're looking at.
And another thing that we're looking at, and hadn't it been because they were coming into earning, which is another rule that we have, that we really don't buy into earning, but they have earnings today. Netflix, they were in the run to buy Warner Brothers, but stepped away when Paramount sort of outbid them, also a little political strangholding. And apart from that, then they have increased their members' fees, plus invented an ad revenue from another member's fee. So in general, looking really good, Hans-Henrik.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a Netflix was a part of our face-off some weeks ago, and we really like it. The thing is that they have added this ad tier, meaning that you can pay less, but then you have to watch some ads in the middle of a show. And if you want to accept that, then it's a cheaper way to watch Netflix. And I think that is good for them, to be honest. They can keep some of the people that would normally skip. As you say, I think it's a really good thing that they didn't get into the Warner Brother things. I think that was being bid way too highly up. I couldn't see that making sense, that pricing. They are still making collaborations with Universal and Sony and Paramount, I think, actually, but just not Warner Brothers. With the quality, fantastic. We can see here all the numbers are really like we would like them to be: free cash flow, return on capital. They are in the lower end of this value chart. You could say 30 to 40 to 50p. Isn't that kind of high? And it might be, but it seems like they have found a good bottom here where they have bottomed out earlier on. They are just getting above the 200-day SMA. And since they're coming up with earnings today, from now on and the coming weeks, we could consider buying it. We never buy straight into the earnings.
So far, in regards to Netflix, we're really fast going to circle around Pepsi. And the reason why we are looking at Pepsi, apart from it's a dividend stock, and we have had sort of a theme with the dividend stocks lately, but it's also one of the things where we kind of look at how are the consumers spending their buck. And this could be the small luxury that you take a Pepsi or a Coke or whatever you drink, rather than drink water or juice or milk or whatever. And that's the small luxury that we're looking for. So it tells a little bit about consumers in the US, how they're doing, really.
Yeah, Pepsi has had some waning numbers for a while, actually, especially in some key areas where people are a bit concerned. But they are a good quality company, definitely. I can't even recall what their dividend is. 3.65%. It's actually, if you're looking for some really good, stable dividend stock, that is not going anywhere, but might fluctuate a bit in price, then Pepsi might be a place to go. Good, solid stock. The earnings per share have been kind of flat for a while. Is expected to go up now. Revenue, again, has not been completely through the roof. Their return on capital have been a bit flat. Free cash flow is absolutely fine, and they can pay the interest on the debt they had. So it's not a company that I'm worried about, and there is some decent potential in it if we believe in the PEs of 22 to 26. I think that is a fairly good range. That is approximately where they have been for the last 5, 10, 20 years. So I think Pepsi, it looks fairly good. I'm a bit bigger fan of Netflix, I must admit. But as we can see here, some people like to draw in some, I can just do that quickly, draw in some areas where we can see market have come in and out earlier on. And we can see a lot of tops here that is bouncing on here. And that is normally a good sign. So we're waiting for green on the MTI daily
before we consider it. Hans-Henrik, I have to ask you a personal question. Is that an Ami shirt that you're wearing? Or
oh no, I always pick the ones with my initials here.
Okay, great. But it would be troublesome because in French you don't pronounce the H. So in that sense, there wouldn't be anything on your shirt. But the reason why we're bringing up this and joking a little bit about it is, of course, the French brand, the luxury brand, Hermès. And yesterday they had a terrible day in the market. Went down by 8%. Their partners, or not partners, but one of their competitors, Kering, in the French market, went down with more than 9%. Trouble in paradise when it comes to luxury goods?
Well, if we look at the Hermès, or MA, or however it's called, French is not my specialty, as you might be able to see or hear. Good quality stock, actually. Earnings per share going up, revenue going up, free cash flow is fine. They are also looking fairly cheap, to be honest, and especially after the drop here yesterday. One of the reasons why we are not buying it is, of course, the overall trend. I think it's fairly easy to see this is not in an uptrend, or not even starting on one. So yes, there was a drop here yesterday, but it's not something we would have been exposed to because we never buy these falling knives. One of the reasons why the drop came yesterday is the overall economic situation in the world. China and Middle East stands to be hit fairly hard by the current situation, and that is where those luxury brands have really found a lot of their new buyers the last 3, 4, 5 years. So I think people are worried about that.
Let's swing to the Danish market really quickly because one of the things that is a good news story for a lot of Danes and also a lot of people holding on to Novo stocks is that this is the third day in a row, maybe the fourth day in a row, that Novo is in the green. They are up by 3% today. They're swinging around the 260 Danish kroners for their stock today. But this time it wasn't because of good news, but mainly because of bad news for their competitors. Eli Lilly have to give the FDA more numbers in regards to their weight loss drug.
Yeah, we've talked about Novo a million times, and that it's a hard one. I've drawn a couple of arrows in here. Overall, is it in a downtrend? Yes, it is. So we would not have been in the entire, well, we were actually in a very quick, brief thing here before we were sent out with a small loss. But we are basically not in the business of guessing bottoms. That said, I think Novo is a fairly well-priced company right now. The earnings are a bit flat. There's not too much growth in it. We can see that here, that the value channel is kind of flat, and that means that is not normally what we are buying into. It is a great company, no doubt. What we have been seeing is that it has moved in these ranges and then broken down. And right now, as you can see, it did it here, went up, broke down, went sideways, up, broke down. Now it has gone sideways and up. Should we go down again? Well, your guess is as good as mine. I would wait until we see some consolidation above the 200 SMA before I start watching it.
That's a little thing telling about the way that we think in regards to the 3-point playbook method that we are using. And as always, we're looking for quality, upside, and timing. One of the things that we're not looking for is dividend, because that's simply not part of the strategy that we hold to our stocks. But today is X day. That means that if you're holding stocks in Scandinavian Tobacco Company, Tryg, or Rockwool, today you will be entitled to dividend. And they just told the three companies what dividends they're coming out with. 4.5 kroner for Scandinavian Tobacco, Tryg 2.15 or 2 kroners and 15 øre, and then 4 kroners and 15 in change from Rockwool. And Hans-Henrik, I know that doesn't really make you tick in regards to getting that income stream in dividends.
No, it's and we've talked about that several times. I think it's fine that people plan for it. I know several people that have retired with a fairly large investment portfolio, and they have simply planned the purchases of stock. After that, they want a decent, almost monthly or at least quarterly income from dividends, and I think that's absolutely fine. It's just not a part of my analysis. So if I buy a stock, I rarely know actually if they're paying dividends. I maybe see that when they tick in on the account and realize, oh, I got dividend from whatever stock, but it's absolutely not a part of my plan.
In regards to you who have checked in late here in the show and are looking for Liam Flavelle, the reason why he's not on is simply because his internet connection gave up on him, and that's beyond his technical abilities to create new internet. So, well, we'll hopefully have him back on Tuesday when we have the English version as well. But we are going to stay in the Danish things or the Danish mood of things here, Hans-Henrik, because I'm going to ask you in regards to DFDS. Yesterday, huge jump, 15.7% up. I was a little bit surprised because I thought, well, they're going to be hit by oil prices, but not so fast, you say.
Well, the reason for the jump yesterday, and they actually continue up today. Wow, they are up another 6.5% today. That is a really good setup. The thing is that they've had a lot of trouble with their Turkish part of business and their Mediterranean, Southern Europe part of business. And it seems like they have turned that around really well right now. And that is what the investors really like to see. I was also a bit curious about the fuel prices, but on all their the commercial agreements with, for instance, the British government about the over the channel and so on, they are at a deal where they can adjust their when they're writing out an invoice, they're adjusting it for fuel prices. It's a bit more troublesome on the where they are sailing with someone like you and me wanting to get
the passenger side, simply
country, just normal citizens because you cannot just double prices or 50% on top of prices there. We will have to wait and see how that turns out. If this crisis keeps going, we will probably, for every week, I also saw an oil analyst saying that for every week from now on, they'll probably be added $3 to $5 on a barrel of oil. And then it's just a question of if it takes 3 months to negotiate a deal with Hormuz, so then we can start to do the calculations. Things start to break, and DFDS will also be hit by that.
If you've shown up for the show here and you're looking for Liam Flavelle, reason he's not here is technical problem with his internet. And on the show, you
said.
But you might want to rewind and go in and hear some of the macro side of business, as Hans-Henrik was just talking about. You will also get news about Netflix, TSM, and Novo if you scroll back and take the beginning of the show. We're coming towards the end. The reason is simply because we're running out of time. But we're going to have a little cartoon for you, or not cartoon. This is a Pokemon. You know who this is, Hans-Henrik?
Oh, absolutely. We have tons of these cards.
Yeah, and this is Charizard, apparently. And, well, we know the Pokemon cards can bring in a lot of money if you have the really rare ones. But did you know that a chip shaped as a Pokemon can bring in serious dough? We're talking $87,000. 840 in change as well, for a Cheeto, a chip that looks like Charizard. And as you can see, it's mounted in a little Pokemon card box where the chip is preserved inside. They put it up on an auction back in 2025 in February. Starting bid was 250, maybe because they thought it was a joke. But this guy wasn't joking. He bought it. He paid more than $72,000 for it, and then there was the premium fees on top of it, so it came out to $87,840 for a Cheeto.
I've seen so many hours of Pokemon with my kids. I think that is the one that starts out as a Charmander and then goes into a Charmeleon or Carmeleon or whatever, and I think there's an extra one called the Mega Charizard, something.
See,
like
I'm so excited about this because we have a fashion expert, we have a tech expert,
we have a Pokemon expert. Yeah, I could be wrong about this. It's really far back, but yeah.
Listen, hopefully Liam will have his internet back and he'll be here on Tuesday when we broadcast in English again. We do that every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 o'clock. We're going to be moving the show when we come up to the 27th of April. We're going to start broadcasting late in the afternoon to get the markets closure with us. So we'll get the European markets to close and we'll have the opening bell from the US market. But for now, English show on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We'll be back in Danish tomorrow at noon, of course. Only thing that's left for here to be said before we go is happy investing out there. Stay safe and have a good one. See you tomorrow.